Thanks for joining us on our streaming service for your First Alert Avalanche Report. I'm your First Alert meteorologist, Callie Zanandri. And joining me is the Deputy Director of the Colorado Avalanche Information Center, Brian Lazar. Brian, we saw some new snow this week, especially hitting the southern mountains. What are the current avalanche conditions looking like?
Yeah, so as our kind of homepage map shows, that you can see we've got widespread areas of considerable moderate avalanche danger, which is level 2 out of 5. And there's really two things driving the danger. The first one is the main headline because this is the most dangerous. Our avalanche is breaking in wind-drifted snow. And I want to show what some of this looks like. So here's an example of a recently skier-triggered avalanche near Fremont Pass. What I want to point out is the characteristics of this terrain feature, which we have a lot of wind-drifted snow moving from right to left on this image onto a steep convex roll and into an area with thin and variable snowpack with lots of rocky terrain features. And this is where we're seeing most avalanche activity and where we want to avoid. You can see that the consequences of triggering an avalanche have not gone down that much. So even though the likelihood continues to become less and less chance of triggering an avalanche, getting caught in one still poses potentially severe outcomes. You can imagine just getting washed down into these trees in this particular avalanche. Here's another one which resulted in a really close call up near Berthoud Pass from just several days ago. Snowboarder here enters a steep convex roll with lots of rocky terrain features. You can see the rocks right below him. This triggers the avalanche. It took this snowboarder for a ride and into some trees. Did break his snowboard, but fortunately he was able to walk away with only a minor injury to his knee. But again, if we take a closer look at the terrain feature which produced this avalanche, again, you can see wind-loaded slope, steep convex roll, and lots of thin rocky areas. This is where people are triggering avalanches. These are the kinds of terrain features that we want to avoid, which leaves plenty of safer slopes to recreate on as we move through the weekend. Again, steep wind-drifted slopes. You can see that it created fairly stiff wind-drifted slabs. Again, steep convex roll, thin rocky area, another close call, but in this case, the skier was able to ski off of the moving debris and avoid a potentially worse outcome. And then lastly, we had just an avalanche release right outside of the town of Telluride, produced a pretty dramatic powder cloud. This one ran naturally just from additional wind-drifted snow. So if there's one headline to take away from this week, it is avoid steep wind-loaded slopes, particularly with convex rolls, where you can obviously see that there's a lot of variability in snowpack height and a lot of thin rocky areas poking through out of the snow surface.
Brian, what about the slopes that didn't see all the wind drifting?
Yeah, and this is the other flavor. This is the secondary headline. In the sheltered slopes that don't have the stiff wind-drifted slabs, we're able to move all of the weak surface snow in the form of these dry sloughs or these facet slough avalanches. They're mostly small, but if you're in continuously steep plunging terrain, they can entrain quite a bit of volume, and even the smaller size can be very dangerous, like if they washed you into these trees, which could cause dramatic injury, or it's easy to get buried if you end up in a tree well, a gully, or a ravine. Fortunately, these avalanches are a little bit easier to predict, and you're generally looking at the north half of the compass in lower elevation sheltered terrain.
Now, we picked up some snow earlier this week, and more snow is expected just in time for the weekend, especially hitting the northern mountains. What can we expect going into the weekend?
Yeah, and we kind of had these two pulses of a much welcome return of snowfall. So the first bit started on Wednesday night and went through Thursday. That brought most of our snow to the southern mountains, as you can see here, with the most dangerous areas potentially being in the southern portion of the Sangre de Cristo range. And then as we move through into the weekend, you can see that we get this northern storm track just clips our most northern mountains. And we could see enough snow by middle of the weekend in the flat tops and in the park range north of the Steamboat to raise the avalanche danger to level 3 or considerable avalanche danger. And so we're going to want to watch for how this northern storm track does play out, because we could see a return of more dangerous conditions in areas that pick up more than about 10 inches of new snowfall.
Well, thank you so much for joining us, Brian, and we will see you here next week for your First Alert Avalanche Report.
Yeah, thank you. You have a nice weekend.